I'm Leo Vance, I'm 27 now, but this story really begins 5 years ago, when my own family labeled me a worthless college dropout and threw me out onto the street with nothing but the clothes on my back and a beat-up laptop. Before I tell you about the moment their jaws hit the floor at what was supposed to be their proudest family event, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always incredible to see how far these stories can reach. Alright, let's get into it. Picture this. The grand ballroom of the Northgate Country Club, the kind of place where the air itself smells expensive. A mix of professionally arranged lilies, old money, and a faint hint of smug satisfaction. Massive chandeliers dripped crystal light onto at least 50 tables, each draped in immaculate white linen. Men in tailored tuxedos and women in shimmering evening gowns moved through the room with the easy grace of people who had never known a day of hardship. This was my sister Isabel's medical school graduation party, a monument to her success, meticulously crafted by my parents. And I, the family ghost, their greatest failure, was standing right in the middle of it all. 5 years is a strange measurement of time, long enough to build a new life from scratch, but short enough that the sting of old wounds can still feel fresh. I wore a charcoal gray suit, custom-made, a quiet statement of a world they couldn't even imagine I was a part of. I had changed, and not just the suit. The desperate, hollowed-out 22-year-old they'd thrown away was gone. In his place stood a man they walked right past, their eyes sliding over me as if I were part of the catering staff. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I saw them holding court near the grand piano, the center of their own universe. My father, Richard Vance, was telling a story, his voice booming with a manufactured joviality that made my teeth ache. My mother, Eleanor, stood beside him, smiling a tight, perfectly practiced smile, her diamonds catching the light. And there was Isabel, the golden child, radiant in a white designer dress, accepting congratulations like a queen receiving her subjects. They were a perfect portrait of success and affluence, a complete and utter lie. I was nursing a glass of sparkling water, observing from the shadows, when a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and an undeniable air of authority approached me. "I don't believe we've been introduced," she said, her voice warm but firm as she extended a hand. "I'm Evelyn Reed, Dean of the medical school." I shook her hand. It was a firm, no-nonsense grip. "Leo, it's a pleasure to meet you, Dean Reed." "Leo," she repeated, her brow furrowing just slightly as she tried to place me. "Are you a colleague of Isabel's?" I took a slow sip of water, my eyes drifting over to my sister, who was now posing for a photo with our beaming parents. "You could say I know her," I replied, the words laced with an irony only I could understand. The dean followed my gaze. "Ah, the Vances, powerful family. Richard has been an incredibly generous donor to the university's new research wing." She turned back to me, her expression one of polite curiosity. "So, how exactly do you know her?" I let the question hang in the air for a moment. I met her eyes and gave a small, unreadable smile. "You have no idea." They had no idea who I was, what I had become, or why I was really there. They saw a stranger in a nice suit. They were about to see the ghost they thought they had buried 5 years ago. My father was walking towards the small stage now, tapping a champagne flute with a spoon for attention. The show was about to begin. But to understand the explosion that was coming, you need to understand the long, slow burn that led to it. You need to go back 5 years, to the night my world ended so a new one could begin. 5 years earlier, the Vance family home was less of a home and more of a museum dedicated to my sister's achievements. Her trophies lined the mantelpiece. Her academic awards were framed in the hallway, and dinner conversations orbited her like planets around a sun. My father, Richard, presided over the dinner table like a judge, and I was perpetually on trial for the crime of not being Isabel. "Isabel, your debate coach called me today," my father would announce, slicing into a piece of steak. "Said your rebuttal in the finals was the sharpest he's seen in a decade. A born litigator, that's what he called you. Of course, you'll make a better doctor." "Oh, Richard, don't embarrass her," my mother Eleanor would say, though her eyes shone with pride. "She's just naturally gifted at everything she does." Isabel would give a small, practiced shrug. It was nothing, really. Then, the full weight of their attention would pivot to me, and the temperature in the room would drop by 20 degrees. Leo, my father would sigh, putting down his fork. Your academic advisor called me, too. Said you're in danger of failing corporate finance. It's not that I can't do it. I try to explain, my voice small. It's just, I don't find it engaging. My mind wanders. Wanders where, son? He'd ask, his voice dripping with condescension. To your little doodles? Doodles. That's what they called my passion. My art. My future. To them, my sketchbooks were evidence of a defective mind, a distraction from the real world of business and finance he had preordained for me. The pattern was established long before college. I remember in high school, I submitted a piece to a statewide art competition. It was a complex digital painting I had spent over 100 hours on. Against all odds, I won. First place. It came with a small scholarship and a letter of commendation from the governor. I was ecstatic. I ran home, clutching the award, my heart pounding with a desperate need for their approval. I found them in the kitchen, celebrating. Isabel had gotten a 98 on a chemistry midterm. A midterm. Mom, Dad, look! I burst out, holding up the plaque. I won. First place in the state. My mother took it from me, glanced at it, and set it on the counter with a thin smile. Oh, that's lovely, dear. Very creative. She immediately turned back to my sister. A 98, Izzy. Your father and I are taking you out to the Clove for dinner to celebrate. The plaque sat on the counter, forgotten. My victory, my passion, my moment, it was an afterthought. An interruption to the main event, which was, as always, Isabel. It was a clear message. Your achievements are a cute hobby. Hers are the family legacy. That night at the dinner table, with the threat of failing finance hanging in the air, I decided to try one last time. I had been working on a branding package for a fictional charity, something I'd poured my soul into. I know the finance stuff is a struggle. I began, my hands clammy under the table. But I wanted to show you what I have been working on. I slid my laptop onto the table and opened the file, revealing a complete set of logos, color palettes, and mock-ups. It's a concept for a nonprofit that helps homeless youth. I was thinking about how branding can build trust and... Isabel snorted into her water glass. You're building a fake brand for fake homeless people while you're about to be a real failure in a real class. The cruelty of it winded me. I looked to my parents for defense, for any sign of support. I found none. My father stared at the screen for a long moment, his expression unreadable. For a split second, I allowed myself a flicker of hope. Maybe this time he'd see. Maybe he'd understand. He closed the laptop, gently but with a horrifying finality. Leo, he said, his voice dangerously quiet, your sister is learning how to save human lives. You are wasting your time, my money, and this family's patience on make-believe. There is no future in this. The world doesn't pay for doodles. It pays for results. He stood up from the table. Your mother and I are paying for a business degree. You will pass your classes, you will graduate, and you will join my firm. That is the only result I will accept. This discussion is over. He walked out of the room. My mother followed, not even giving me a backward glance. I was left alone at the giant mahogany table, surrounded by the ghosts of 1,000 similar conversations. In that moment I knew I couldn't do it anymore. Hope was a luxury I could no longer afford. Their love wasn't unconditional. It was a performance bonus for a job I didn't want, and I was about to be fired. The final confrontation wasn't a spontaneous explosion. It was a slow, deliberate demolition. A week after the disastrous dinner conversation, I officially withdrew from my finance class. I knew it would trigger an alert to my father, who monitored my academic progress like a hawk. I spent that week in a state of quiet terror, packing a duffel bag in secret, gathering the few things that mattered. My laptop, my hard drives full of design work, my sketch pads, and a faded photograph of my grandmother. The call came on a Sunday evening. My office, now, was all my father said before hanging up. The study felt like a courtroom. My father sat behind his massive desk. My mother stood by the fireplace, her arms crossed, her expression like stone. My academic withdrawal notice was on the desk between us. "Explain this," my father said. It wasn't a question. It was a command. "I can't do it, Dad," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I'm not a businessman. I'm a designer. I've enrolled in 2 online design certification courses. I'm going to build a portfolio and get a job in a field I'm actually good at." "You are good at what I tell you you're good at," he roared, slamming his fist on the desk, making the lamp jump. "You are a Vance. We are not flighty, starving artists. We are leaders, financiers. Do you have any idea the shame you are bringing on this family?" "What shame?" I shot back, my own voice rising. "The shame of being different? The shame of not being a carbon copy of you? Or is it just the shame of having a son who isn't Isabel?" That hit a nerve. My mother flinched. "Do not bring your sister into this," she hissed. "Your sister has worked for everything she has. She has never disappointed us. You do nothing but disappoint. I disappoint you because I'm not her." I was on my feet now, my fists clenched. "I could cure cancer and you'd be disappointed it wasn't a high-yield investment. You've never once, not once, supported a single thing that I genuinely cared about." "Support?" My father laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "We gave you a life of privilege, a roof over your head, food on the table, a top-tier education that you are now throwing in the garbage. That is support. What you're asking for isn't support, it's endorsement of a fantasy. And we will not endorse failure." He stood up and walked around the desk until he was standing directly in front of me, looking down at me with utter contempt. "So here are your choices, Leo. You will re-enroll in your classes tomorrow morning and you will beg your professor for a second chance. Or you will walk out that door and you will never come back. If you choose this ridiculous design path, you are no longer our son. We will cut you off completely. No money, no contact, nothing. You will be on your own." I looked at him, at his furious, unyielding face. I looked at my mother, who was watching me with cold, dead eyes. There was no negotiation here. No room for compromise. This was an ultimatum. Be them or be nothing. A strange calm settled over me. The fear was gone, burned away by years of accumulated pain and resentment. The choice was so stark, so absolute, that it was actually simple. "I guess I'm on my own then," I said quietly. I turned without another word and walked out of the study. My duffel bag was already by the door. As I reached for the handle, my mother's voice, sharp as broken glass, cut through the silence behind me. "You're nothing but a worthless, ugly college dropout," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "Don't you dare show your face in this family again. Don't you dare." I didn't look back. I opened the heavy oak door, stepped out into the cold night air, and heard the deadbolt slide shut behind me. The sound was deafeningly final. It was the sound of my old life ending. I was 22 years old, homeless, and disowned. But for the first time in as long as I could remember, I was free. Freedom, it turned out, was cold and terrifying. The first night, I drove to a deserted parking lot overlooking the city and tried to sleep in the cramped back seat of my Honda Civic. Every creak of the car, every distant siren, sent a jolt of panic through me. The words of my parents echoed in the suffocating silence. Worthless. Disgrace. Dropout. The next few weeks were a descent into a kind of hell I hadn't known existed. I couch-surfed for a while, but you can only impose on friends for so long before their pity sours into resentment. I wore out my welcomes one by one, until there were no more doors to knock on. The car became my home. I learned the rhythm of homelessness. I knew which public parks had restrooms that were open early. I knew how to make a 99-cent cup of coffee from a gas station last for 3 hours to use their Wi-Fi. I learned to ignore the gnawing hunger in my stomach and the deeper, more painful hunger for a kind word or a safe place to sleep. Depression was a constant companion, a heavy, wet blanket that smothered every spark of hope. I'd sit in my car during torrential downpours, watching the world go by, feeling completely invisible. In those moments, I came dangerously close to believing my parents were right. Maybe this was all I deserved. A failure living in a metal box going nowhere. I got a job washing dishes at a 24-hour diner. It was brutal, thankless work. My hands were perpetually chapped and smelled of grease and bleach. I'd stand over a steaming sink for 8 hours, scraping dried egg yolk off plates. My mind a numb buzz of exhaustion. But it was a paycheck. It was gas money. It was instant noodles and the occasional slice of pizza. It was survival. My only escape was a small, independent coffee shop called The Grind. It had comfortable, worn-out armchairs, a tolerant owner, and most importantly, reliable Wi-Fi. It became my lifeline. After my shift at the diner, I'd go to a truck stop to take a cheap shower, put on my one clean shirt, and head to the grind. There, in my corner chair, I would open my laptop and I would work. I wasn't just doodling anymore. I was studying. I devoured online tutorials on typography, UI/UX design, and branding strategy. I dissected the work of great designers. And I created. I poured all the loneliness, all the anger, all the shame into my designs. It was the only time I felt like I had a voice, a purpose. I had noticed her before. A woman with dark, intelligent eyes who was always there, tapping away furiously on her own laptop. We were both members of the unofficial Grind Office Club. We'd exchange polite nods, but that was it. Her name, I'd learned from the baristas, was Chloe. One evening, she broke the unspoken code of silence. I was working on a particularly complex logo, getting frustrated, and I must have let out an audible sigh. "Code not compiling?" she asked, not looking up from her screen. "Something like that," I mumbled. "Just design stuff." "Let me see," she said, surprising me. She got up and walked over, peering at my screen. I felt a flush of embarrassment, expecting the same dismissal I'd gotten my whole life. She was silent for a long moment, studying the intricate lines and negative space of the logo. "That's clever," she said finally. "The way the E and the V merge to create a mountain peak. It's for a company called Everest Consulting." "Nice." I was stunned. "You got all that from just looking at it?" She gave me a small, wry smile. "I'm a programmer. I spend my life looking for patterns and logic. Your work has both. It's not just pretty, it's smart." She pointed at the screen. "You've got a real gift. No one had ever said that to me before. Not like that. Not with such simple, unvarnished sincerity." A dam inside me broke. And over the next hour, fueled by cheap coffee, I told her everything. The family, the fight, the disownment, the car, the diner. I laid out the whole pathetic story of my life. When I finished, my voice hoarse, I braced myself for the pity, the awkward condolences. Chloe just took a slow sip of her latte. "Okay," she said. "So your rich, narcissistic parents kicked you out because you wouldn't be their clone. Sounds to me like you escaped a cult." The bluntness of it shocked a laugh out of me. "They called your passion worthless?" she continued, her eyes flashing with indignation. "Leo, I build websites for a living. I know what good design is worth. It's worth everything. It's the difference between a company that looks professional and one that looks like a joke. What you do has real, tangible value." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "I've got a client right now, a small organic bakery. Sweet people, great product, terrible website. Their budget is basically nothing, but it's a real, paying gig. I'm building their site, but they need a logo, a brand identity. You want in?" It was more than a job offer. It was a rope, thrown down into the dark pit I was in. It was a voice saying, "I see you. What you do matters." "Yes," I said, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. "Yes, absolutely." In that dingy coffee shop, a partnership was formed. A business was born. And a life was saved. Mine. The bakery job was our first test. We poured everything we had into it. We held our client meetings at a wobbly table in the back of the grind, sketching ideas on napkins. I worked on the logo during my breaks at the diner, my hands still smelling faintly of bleach. Chloe coded the website late into the night. We presented the final product to the bakery owners, a kind older couple, my heart pounding with the fear of rejection. They loved it. They actually cried. The $500 they paid us felt like $1 million. It was the first money I had ever earned for being me. That small victory was the spark that lit the fuse. We started hungry. We scoured freelance platforms, sending out 50 proposals for every one response. We took on any job, no matter how small. A flyer for a lost dog, a menu for a new taqueria, a banner ad for a local car wash. We built a portfolio one tiny project at a time. We also faced our share of failures. I remember one of our first big pitches. It was for a small chain of fitness studios. We worked for 2 weeks straight, sleeping maybe 4 hours a night, to create a full branding presentation. We walked into their corporate office, two young, hungry freelancers with a laptop and a dream. We gave the pitch of our lives. They listened politely and then went with a bigger, more established agency. Leaving that office, I felt the familiar sting of failure. Maybe my parents were right, I muttered to Chloe as we walked down the street. Maybe we're just not cut out for this. Chloe stopped in the middle of the sidewalk and turned to face me. "Don't you dare," she said, her voice fierce. "Don't you dare let them get in your head. We lost one pitch. One. Did you see the look on their faces when you presented the concepts? They were impressed. We were just too small, too new. We're going to lose more. That's how this works. You get knocked down, you get back up, and you aim for a bigger client. Now let's go get some pizza and figure out how to land the next one." Her belief in me was relentless. It was the scaffolding that held me up while I was still rebuilding my own sense of self-worth. After 6 months of this grueling routine, I finally saved enough to quit the dishwashing job. It was one of the best days of my life. I walked out of that diner, threw my grease-stained apron in a dumpster, and never looked back. A week later, I moved into a tiny studio apartment. The shower had 2 settings, scalding hot and ice cold, and the guy next door played the tuba at 3 a.m., but it was mine. It was a home. Chloe and I decided to make it official. We pooled our meager savings, registered an LLC, and gave our partnership a name. Innovate Leo. It was Chloe's idea. "Because you're the innovator," she said. "And because it's going to piss your family off someday when they see it." We moved from the coffee shop to a shared co-working space, a single desk that we split. And we started aiming higher. We targeted tech startups, companies that valued fresh ideas over stuffy corporate pedigrees. Our portfolio, once filled with small local businesses, started to include sleek, modern brands. Our big break came about 1.5 years in. We landed a meeting with Mark Jennings, the notoriously demanding CEO of a rising star in the fintech world, Viridian Dynamics. Every design agency in the city was vying for their rebranding contract. We were the undeniable underdogs. We walked into a boardroom that overlooked the entire city. I was terrified, but as I started talking about the design philosophy, about the story we wanted to tell with their brand, the fear melted away. I was in my element. When I finished, Jennings was quiet, staring at the presentation. He turned to his board members, then back to us. "Everyone else who pitched us gave us a prettier version of what we already are," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You two just showed me what we could become." We walked out of that building with a contract that had so many zeros on it, I thought it was a typo. That night, sitting with Chloe on the floor of our tiny co-working space, surrounded by empty pizza boxes, I finally understood. My father was wrong. The world did pay for doodles, and it paid very, very well. That contract wasn't just a foundation for our company. It was the foundation for the rest of my life. 5 years is a lifetime. The man who received that email on a Tuesday afternoon was a stranger to the boy who had been kicked out of his home. That boy was scared, broken, and desperate. This man was the CEO of his own company. Innovate Leo had a team of 12 brilliant employees, a waiting list of clients, and a reputation for being one of the most creative agencies in the country. I owned a condo downtown with a view that still took my breath away. The dull ache of my family's betrayal had faded, replaced by the vibrant, demanding pulse of a life I loved. I had built a fortress around myself, not of anger, but of success and new relationships. My team wasn't just my employees. They were my family. Chloe was my partner in every sense of the word, the sister I should have had. The Vances were a chapter in a book I had long since closed and put on a high shelf to gather dust. Then the email arrived. It was from a Helen Gable, a name that dredged up memories of my mother's charity luncheons and the cloying scent of Chanel No. 5, a professional gossip columnist who disguised herself as a housewife. The subject line was almost comically cheerful. A celebration for Isabel. My immediate, visceral reaction was to slam my laptop shut. It felt like a home invasion, a violation of the safe world I had so carefully constructed. My finger hovered over the delete button, my heart hammering against my ribs. A full-blown fight-or-flight response. "Leo, you look like you're about to throw your computer out the window," Chloe said from her desk. Her ability to read my mood was almost telepathic. I swallowed hard, forcing the panic down. "It's from them," I said, my voice strained. "Well, from one of their cronies." I turned the monitor so she could see. She read the ostentatious digital invitation, her lips thinning into a hard line. A photo of Isabel, looking impossibly perfect in her cap and gown, smiled out at us. "Richard and Eleanor Vance request the pleasure of your company." "The nerve," Chloe said, her voice a low growl. "After 5 years of absolute, deafening silence. They send this? What do they want? For you to show up and applaud?" "I don't know, and I don't care," I said, my voice harder than I intended. "I'm deleting it." "Wait," she said, putting a hand on my arm. "Don't. Not yet. Just think for a second." "There's nothing to think about," I shot back. "Going there would be like a sheep willingly walking back into the slaughterhouse. I have nothing to say to them." "I know," she said patiently. "This wouldn't be for them. It would be for you." I stared at her, uncomprehending. "For me? Why on earth would I want to put myself through that?" "Because," she said, her gaze steady and serious, "you're not the same person who left that house, Leo. That boy was a victim. He was powerless. The man sitting in this chair right now is one of the most successful designers in this city. You don't have to go and hide. You have the right to walk into that room with your head held high and let them see exactly who they threw away. You don't have to say a word. Your presence alone would be the final chapter. It would be closure." I hated that she was making sense. The thought of facing them filled me with a cold dread. But the image she painted of walking in there not as their failure, but as my own success was undeniably compelling. It was a chance to rewrite the ending of my own story, an ending they wouldn't control. "I don't know, Chloe," I said, the conflict warring inside me. "It feels dangerous." "The most dangerous things are sometimes the most necessary," she replied. I leaned back, the invitation burning on my screen. I still couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. This wasn't a gesture of reconciliation, however twisted. It was a move, a calculated, strategic move. My family never did anything without an agenda, and I was about to find out exactly what it was. The feeling of a chess piece being moved into position wouldn't leave me. For 2 days I agonized over the invitation. Chloe's logic was sound. Facing them could be empowering. But my gut, honed by years of navigating their emotional minefields, was screaming that this was a trap. "They've never done anything that wasn't for their own benefit," I explained to Chloe as we ordered coffee. "Every gift had strings. Every compliment was a setup for a later criticism. Why would this be any different?" That's when the memory surfaced. It was faint, like a dream from childhood. I was about 18, sitting in a stuffy lawyer's office after my grandmother's funeral. She was my mother's mom, a kind, vibrant woman who had always smelled of cinnamon and paint thinner. She was an amateur artist herself and the only person who had ever bought me a professional set of sketch pencils. I remembered the lawyer, a dry man named Mr. Abernathy, talking about her will. He mentioned something about a significant inheritance, for both me and Isabel, managed in a trust. My parents had quickly shushed him, saying they would handle the complexities. I was too deep in grief to care about money, so I had let it go. Until now. The moment I got back to the office, I called Sam Chun. "Sam, I need you to do some digging for me," I said, and proceeded to lay out the whole bizarre situation. The 5 years of no contact, the sudden, formal invitation, and my hazy memory of a trust fund. A trust fund with your parents as executors? Sam's voice immediately lost its casual tone and became razor-sharp. And a sudden invitation right at the 5-year mark? Leo, that is a colossal red flag. In legal terms, 5 years is a magic number for a lot of things, including statutes of limitation and abandonment clauses in wills and trusts. An abandonment clause? I repeated, a cold knot forming in my stomach. It's a stipulation an estate planner might include to prevent a beneficiary who has completely cut ties from inheriting, Sam explained. For example, if a child abandoned their elderly parent, this clause could prevent them from swooping in to collect after the parent passes. But it can be manipulated. "Tell me everything you remember about your grandmother." I told him about her love for art, her encouragement, how she was the one person who saw my passion as a gift. "Okay," Sam said after a long pause. "A woman like that wouldn't want to disinherit a grandchild for following their passion. Which means if there is a clause, your parents are likely misinterpreting it for their own gain. Let me make some calls. Wills are public record, but trusts can be private. It might take some work to uncover the documents." Took him 48 hours. He called me back on Friday afternoon. I put him on speakerphone. "I've got it," Sam said, and his voice was grim. "I had to pull a lot of strings, but I have a copy of your grandmother's trust agreement. She was a very clever, very careful woman, Leo. She set up 2 identical trust funds, one for you, one for Isabel. The funds are substantial. We're talking life-changing money. They were to be held until your 30th birthdays." "Okay," I said, my breath catching in my throat. "And yes," Sam continued, "there is a familial abandonment clause. It's very specifically worded. It states that if a beneficiary is shown to have willfully abandoned all attempts at familial relations for a continuous period of 5 years, their trust is forfeited and absorbed by the siblings' trust. The execution of this clause requires the trustees, your parents, to demonstrate they made a good faith effort to reestablish contact, which was willfully rejected." The pieces of the puzzle slammed into place with sickening force. "The invitation," I whispered. "The invitation," Sam confirmed. "It's their documented good faith effort. It's Exhibit A. They were banking on you being so angry and hurt that you'd ignore it or send back a nasty reply. Either way, they'd have their proof of your rejection. If you show up, I'd bet my license they have a document for you to sign. Something disguised as a gesture of peace that legally signs away your rights to the inheritance." The audacity of it, the cold, calculating cruelty, took my breath away. They hadn't just kicked me out. They hadn't just erased me from their lives. They had put a timer on my back, and for 5 years, they had been waiting patiently for it to run out so they could collect their prize. "So they don't want to see me," I said, the realization dawning in its full horror. "They just want my money. My grandmother's money." "They're not inviting you to a party, Leo," Sam said, his voice hard as steel. "They're serving you a subpoena to your own financial dismemberment." I hung up the phone. The room was silent. I looked at Chloe, my eyes burning. All the pain, all the hurt, all the lingering questions of the past 5 years had just been replaced by a single, clarifying emotion. Cold, diamond-hard rage. "I'm going to that party," I said. My voice was quiet, but it held the promise of an earthquake. "And I'm going to burn their whole world to the ground." The rage didn't burn hot and wild. It cooled into something far more dangerous. A plan. The next few days were a blur of focused preparation. The party was no longer a personal trial. It was a battlefield, and I intended to walk onto it as the most well-prepared soldier. My first move was to meet Sam Chun at his downtown office. The conference room was stark and modern, a place where emotions were stripped away and only facts remained. "They think they're in control," Sam said, pacing in front of a floor-to-ceiling window. "They have the social standing, the history, the narrative. We need to shatter that narrative with undeniable, irrefutable proof. He laid out our strategy. Step 1 was the legal paperwork. He drafted a brutal set of documents. A formal demand for an immediate accounting of the trust's assets, a legally binding agreement for them to sign that would relinquish all claims to my portion of the inheritance, and a cease and desist letter so airtight it could suffocate them. It forbade them from ever mentioning my name, my company's name, or any fabricated story about my life to anyone, ever again. But this is just paper, Sam warned, tapping the stack. It has no power until you give it power. You need leverage. Something that will make it more painful for them not to sign than to sign. That's where step 2 came in. They expect the broken kid, I reasoned. They'll be arrogant. My sister will be careless. My parents will be condescending. They'll talk. Sam smiled. It was not a friendly smile. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a sleek, metallic pen. Then let's make sure we hear every word. This is a high-fidelity digital voice recorder. The audio quality is forensic grade. 1 click on the top to start, 1 to stop. It'll pick up a whisper from across a room. Get Isabel talking about the papers. Get your father lying about your overseas success. Get your mother saying something dismissive. Get anything. The pen felt heavy in my hand, like a weapon. Step 3 was the armor. I knew I couldn't walk in there looking like their victim. I went to a tailor my father despised for being too modern and had a suit made. Charcoal gray wool, sharp lines, perfect fit. It was a suit that didn't scream for attention. It commanded it. It was the physical manifestation of the man I had become. The night before the party, I was in my condo practicing. I stood in front of a mirror, trying to project an aura of calm confidence I didn't entirely feel. What would I say? How would I react when I saw them? A wave of anxiety washed over me. The old fears, the old feelings of worthlessness, were still there, lurking beneath the surface. My phone buzzed. It was Chloe. Final pre-battle check-in, she said. How's the soldier? Nervous? I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. What if I can't do it, Chloe? What if I see them and I just freeze? You won't, she said, her voice a rock of certainty. Listen to me, Leo. Tomorrow, when you walk into that room, I want you to remember something. Remember sleeping in your car on that freezing November night. Remember the smell of the dishwater at the diner. Remember losing that first big pitch and feeling like a failure. And then, I want you to remember landing the Viridian Dynamics contract. Remember hiring Maya and seeing the look on her face when you told her her work was brilliant. You did that. All of it. They didn't. They have no power over you anymore. You are not their son walking into a family party. You are the CEO of Innovate Leo walking into a business negotiation. And you are going to win. Her words were like a shot of adrenaline to the heart. She was right. This wasn't about family anymore. This was business. And it was time to close the deal. The moment I stepped through the grand doors of the Northgate Country Club, I felt the shift. It was like passing through an invisible barrier into a foreign country where I used to live. The air was thick with the same cloying perfume, the same entitled laughter, the same polite, meaningless chatter. But this time I wasn't a part of it. I was an observer, a ghost at their feast. I took a glass of water from a tray and found a strategic position by a large marble pillar. It gave me a clear view of the room's main traffic areas. I was a chameleon, blending in perfectly. My suit was just as expensive as theirs, my posture just as confident. And because of that, I was utterly invisible to the people who should have recognized me most. My father was the center of a circle of portly, gray-haired men, all laughing uproariously at one of his jokes. My mother, a vision in emerald green, was accepting compliments on the party's decor. Isabel was surrounded by a coterie of friends, all fawning over her. I watched them for 20 minutes. They moved past my pillar, sometimes only feet away, without a single glance in my direction. They were looking for familiar faces, important people. I was neither. Then I saw a face I did recognize. Helen Gable, the woman who sent the email, was bearing down on me, her eyes alight with the thrill of a fresh piece of gossip. You must be a friend of Isabel's from the hospital, she gushed, offering a cheek for a kiss I didn't take. I'm Helen Gable, a dear friend of the family. Leo, I said simply, not offering a last name. Leo, what a strong name. It's just such a tragedy that Richard and Eleanor's own son couldn't be here, she said, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. He's in Europe, you know, an incredible success in the import-export business. But so busy, he hasn't been home in years. Eleanor is just heartbroken, though she'd never show it. The ease with which she recited the lie was stunning. It was their official story, disseminated to their entire social circle. I just nodded, a grim smile playing on my lips. What a shame, I said. Just as she was about to pry for more information, a warm voice saved me. Leo, by God, is that really you? I turned to see Professor Alistair Finch, my former art history professor, weaving his way through the crowd. His face was etched with genuine delight and surprise. Professor Finch, I said, my smile real for the first time that night. It's good to see you. Good to see you? My boy, it's wonderful to see you, he exclaimed, shaking my hand vigorously. He looked me up and down. The last I heard from your father, you were shipping goods across the Atlantic. This is a pleasant surprise. You look fantastic. Life is treating you well. I've been lucky, I said, the understatement of the century. Nonsense, he scoffed. Luck has nothing to do with it. Talent is what you have. I always said it. A true artist's eye. It was a crime to keep you chained to a balance sheet. As we were catching up, I saw my chance. Isabel, looking annoyed, had broken away from her friends and was heading toward a secluded alcove to take a call. I excused myself from Professor Finch, promising to catch up later. I followed her at a distance, my hand going to my jacket pocket. I rounded a corner decorated with a large floral arrangement, putting me just out of her line of sight but only 10 feet away. I clicked the top of the pen. Her voice was a sharp, angry hiss. I don't care if it's awkward, Mother. He's not even here. How am I supposed to get him to sign the papers if he doesn't show up? What do you mean, be charming? I'm not going to grovel. I just need his signature on the waiver. The lawyer said that without it, we can't touch the inheritance. Yes, I'll tell him it's about the college fund, some nonsense about updating the estate. Just make sure Dad brings the document. I want this done tonight. I've waited 5 years for this money. Every word was a nail in her coffin. Waiver, inheritance, college fund. 5 years. She had just narrated their entire criminal conspiracy. I clicked the pen again, stopping the recording. I straightened my tie, the adrenaline singing in my veins. I had the leverage. I had the weapon. I stepped out from behind the flowers and walked back into the heart of the party, a predator who had just marked his prey. The time for hiding was over. The gentle chime of a spoon tapping against a champagne flute silenced the room. My father, Richard Vance, stood on the low stage, basking in the spotlight, his face aglow with pride and a little too much expensive scotch. Friends, esteemed colleagues, family, he began. His voice a smooth, practiced baritone that had charmed boardrooms and investors for decades. Thank you. Thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate a truly momentous occasion. My daughter, Isabel Vance, M.D. He paused, letting the title hang in the air as a wave of applause rippled through the ballroom. My mother, standing near the stage, dabbed at a perfectly dry eye with a silk handkerchief. It was masterful theater. Brilliance, dedication, a relentless pursuit of excellence. My father continued, his voice swelling with emotion. These are the values we, as a family, hold most dear. Isabel embodies all of them. She has made us prouder than words can ever say. I started to move then, not with any urgency, but with a slow, deliberate purpose that drew the eyes of those I passed. I saw Professor Finch speaking with Dean Reed near the side of the stage. My destination was clear. I was positioning my key witnesses. Of course, my father went on. Isabel is not our only child, and not our only source of pride. Many of you have been asking about my son, Leo. He adopted a look of fond, fatherly regret. He sends his deepest apologies that he couldn't be with us tonight. As you know, his work has him based in Europe. He's built a tremendously successful import-export business from the ground up. It's a demanding field, but he's thriving. We are so proud of both our children and the incredible paths they've chosen. The lie was so polished, so complete, it was almost impressive. He wasn't just erasing me. He was replacing me with a more acceptable version, a son who had succeeded on his terms. I reached the spot next to Professor Finch just as a sneering voice cut through the air. "Well, I'll be damned," the voice said. I didn't have to turn to know it was Ben Carter, the college sycophant. He had positioned himself with Isabel's friends, and he was speaking loudly enough for everyone in a 20-foot radius to hear. "Leo Vance. I thought the Vances had fumigated and gotten rid of their pest problem years ago." A few of his friends snickered. Dean Reed's polite smile tightened. Professor Finch's face clouded over with anger. "What are you doing here, Vance?" Ben pressed on, emboldened by the attention. "Did your doodle business go bust? Here to ask Daddy for a loan." This was their narrative of me, the pathetic failure, the charity case. Ben was just their unwitting mouthpiece. I met his gaze across the small space between us. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a reaction. I just held his stare, my expression unreadable. Before the silence could become awkward, Professor Finch stepped forward, his posture radiating academic authority. "Ben, your memory must be failing you," he said, his voice calm but with an edge of steel. "I remember Leo as one of the most intellectually curious and creatively gifted students I had the pleasure of teaching. His decision to leave the business program wasn't a failure. It was an act of profound intellectual courage. He chose to pursue his actual talent instead of a path of least resistance." Ben's smug expression dissolved into confusion. He had been publicly corrected by a respected academic. I just meant," he stammered, looking to his friends for support they didn't offer. "I know exactly what you meant," I said, my voice quiet but carrying the weight of finality. I turned my back on him, a gesture of complete dismissal, and focused my attention back on the stage. My father was raising his glass. So a toast to my daughter, the doctor, and to the Vance family, a legacy of success. "To success," the crowd echoed. As the applause died down, I caught my father's eye. He was looking right at me. The jovial mask dropped. His face cycled through a series of emotions in a split second. Confusion, disbelief, recognition, and then a surge of pure, undiluted fury. The look in his eyes said it all. "How dare you show your face here? How dare you ruin our perfect night?" He had no idea. The night was just getting started, and I wasn't there to ruin it. I was there to end it. As my father stepped off the stage, his face a thundercloud of controlled rage, Dean Evelyn Reed intercepted him, her smile bright and completely genuine. She was the only one in our immediate vicinity who hadn't sensed the tectonic plates shifting beneath the ballroom floor. "Richard, what a moving speech," she said, shaking his hand. "You and Eleanor must be floating on air tonight." She then turned her warm gaze to me. "And what a wonderful surprise that your son could make it after all. You must be so thrilled to have him home." My father's jaw was so tight I could see the muscle jump. "Leo's presence is unexpected," he managed to grind out, his eyes boring into me with a look that could curdle milk. "Well, I for one am absolutely delighted," Dean Reed said, her tone shifting seamlessly from social grace to professional purpose. "In fact, it's a stroke of incredible luck. Mr. Vance," she said, now addressing me directly, her voice crisp and focused, "I've been hoping to get a meeting with you for weeks. My team has been hitting a brick wall with your assistant. The university's board has just approved a comprehensive, multi-year rebranding initiative for the entire medical school and its 5 affiliated hospitals. It's a massive undertaking, a 7-figure project." She paused, letting the weight of that number settle. My father's angry expression was morphing into one of confusion. My mother and Isabel, drawn by the strange energy, had moved closer. After an exhaustive 6-month search, Dean Reed continued, her eyes alight with professional admiration. Reviewing proposals from every top agency in the state, the board has made a unanimous decision. The firm we've chosen, the firm we believe is the only one with the vision to execute this, is Innovatio. The silence that followed was not merely an absence of noise. It was a physical presence. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of the room. I could feel the individual heartbeats of the people around me. My father stared at her, then at me, then back at her. His brain was visibly short-circuiting, trying to process the impossible words he had just heard. Innovate, Leo? He stammered, the name foreign and strange on his tongue. What are you talking about? His company? Dean Reed said, a hint of confusion in her own voice now, as if she couldn't comprehend why this wasn't common knowledge. Leo Vance is the founder and chief creative officer of Innovatio. Honestly, Richard, you should be boasting. They're the most sought-after design and branding agency on the entire West Coast right now. We were genuinely concerned he wouldn't even have time for a project of our scale. This was it. The moment of detonation. The perfect, beautiful, catastrophic twist. The validation wasn't coming from my mouth. It was coming from the dean of my sister's medical school. A woman whose opinion and whose money held more weight in my father's world than anything I could ever say or do. My mother's perfectly lipsticked mouth fell open. A tiny, almost silent gasp escaped her lips. Her face went as white as the tablecloths. Isabel looked as if she had been physically struck, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. That's a lie, Eleanor whispered, her voice a reedy, desperate sound. He's a college dropout. He washes dishes. Dean Reed's eyebrows shot up into her hairline. She looked from my mother's frantic expression to my calm one. He's a visionary, she corrected, her voice now holding a distinct chill. I finally spoke. My voice was quiet, yet it seemed to boom in the suffocating silence. It's true. All of it. I let my gaze travel from my father's stunned face, to my mother's horrified one, to my sister's crumbling one. Funny, isn't it? The worthless dropout, who washes dishes, is the one you're all now desperately hoping to hire. My father finally found his voice, a pathetic attempt at salvaging the situation. Now, son, let's not be dramatic, he said, trying to force a laugh. We're incredibly proud of you. We always have been. We just didn't know all the details of your success. Details? I repeated, and this time I did laugh, a short, humorless bark. You call 5 years of lies a detail? You call telling everyone I work in import-export a detail? What about the most important detail of all? The real reason you invited me here tonight. I turned my full attention to my sister, who flinched as if I had raised my hand. You had some papers for me to sign, didn't you, Izzy? A waiver? Something about updating the family's college fund? Or should we be more honest and call it what it is? A coordinated, 5-year plot to commit fraud and steal my inheritance from our grandmother. That is a vile, disgusting accusation, my mother shrieked, her carefully constructed composure shattering completely. Is it? I asked calmly. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the pen. I held it up between my thumb and forefinger. Because this pen is a digital recorder. And it has a crystal-clear recording of you, Isabel, on the phone with Mother not 2 hours ago, outlining your entire plan. Every single sordid detail. I didn't have to play it. The sight of the pen, combined with the absolute certainty in my voice, was enough. The color drained from Isabel's face. My father looked at the pen as if it were a snake poised to strike. The small crowd of onlookers around us gasped. The whispers were no longer whispers. They were a rising tide of scandal. The Vances, the perfect family. Thieves, liars, frauds. Their reputation, the currency they valued above all else. Above decency, above honesty, above their own son, was going up in flames. And I was the one holding the match. This was the moment everything changed. The moment I finally took back control of my life. Thank you for sticking with me to this point. You guys are amazing. If you could, Please hit that like button and comment the number 1 down below, just so I know you've been on this journey with me. It not only helps more people find this story, but it also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey. The implosion was swift and total. The party died. The music faded. The laughter stopped. The only sound was the rising murmur of shocked whispers. Guests who had been fawning over my parents' minutes before were now staring, their faces a mixture of pity and contempt. My family had become a spectacle, a real-life soap opera unfolding in the middle of the ballroom. My father, a man who had commanded boardrooms his entire life, was rendered utterly impotent. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, no words coming out. He was a king whose castle had just crumbled around him, leaving him exposed and powerless on a pile of rubble. My mother was the first to react. Her instinct for self-preservation, honed over a lifetime of social climbing, took over. She grabbed my father's arm. "Richard, we're leaving. Now," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. She tried to pull him, but he was frozen. Isabel, however, completely fell apart. Her perfect night, her coronation, was now a public trial where she was the lead defendant. Sobs racked her body, ugly, gasping sounds. "You ruined it!" she shrieked at me, tears carving black mascara tracks down her pale cheeks. "You ruined everything. This was my night. It was supposed to be about me." The breathtaking narcissism of her outburst, even now, was astounding. After being caught in a conspiracy to defraud me, her primary concern was that her party was spoiled. "You ruined your own night, Isabel," I replied, my voice calm and even. The anger had passed, leaving behind a cold, clear emptiness. "You ruined it 5 years ago when you stood by and watched them throw me out. You ruined it every day since when you let them lie about me. And you sealed the deal tonight when you tried to steal from me. This isn't on me. This is the bill for your own actions finally coming due." Dean Reed, looking mortified to be caught in the middle of this domestic warfare but also undeniably resolute, stepped forward. She addressed my parents with a tone that was pure ice. "Richard, Eleanor, I agree with your wife. It is time for you to leave." The command was unmistakable. She then turned to me, and her expression softened fractionally. "Leo, my office will be in touch with your office on Monday morning to schedule a preliminary project meeting." It was a public execution of their social standing. In front of everyone, she had dismissed them and legitimized me. That's what finally broke my father's paralysis. The thought of losing the university's prestige, the social capital of being a major donor, was more horrifying to him than anything else. He allowed my mother to drag him away, his movements stiff and jerky like a puppet with its strings cut. Isabel stumbled after them, her sobs echoing in the now silent room. As they made their retreat, pushing through the crowd of staring guests who parted for them as if they were lepers, my mother turned her head and shot me one last look. It was not a look of sadness or regret. It was a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. It was the look you give to an enemy who has burned your city to the ground. It was the last real emotion I would ever see from her. Professor Finch came over and laid a heavy hand on my shoulder. His eyes were misty. "Leo," he said, his voice thick, "that was the bravest thing I have ever witnessed. I am so sorry you had to do it. But my God, I am proud of the man you have become." I could only nod, a lump forming in my throat. I looked around the room, at the debris of a life I never wanted and a family I no longer had. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I just felt quiet. For the first time in 5 years, the roaring in my head, the constant need to prove, to fight, to survive had finally stopped. There was only silence. And in that silence, there was peace. The conference room at Sam Chen's law firm was aggressively neutral. Beige walls, a polished mahogany table, and a single, sterile floral arrangement. It was a room designed to strip away emotion and leave only the cold, hard facts of legal agreements. I was there first, sitting at the head of the table. Chloe sat to my right, a silent, unwavering pillar of support. She wasn't just my business partner. She was my family, and she had insisted on being there to witness the final act. They arrived precisely on time, trailed by their lawyer, a man who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. They were a pathetic sight, stripped of their country club glamour. My father's expensive suit seemed to hang off him, his usual robust confidence replaced by a sullen, resentful slump. My mother wore dark sunglasses, even indoors, a failed attempt to hide the bitterness in her eyes. Isabel was a ghost, pale and silent, staring at a fixed point on the table. Sam entered, all brisk efficiency. He didn't offer condolences or pleasantries. He was a surgeon here to make a clean incision. "Good morning," he said, placing a thick stack of documents in the center of the table. "We are here today to finalize the resolution regarding the trust fund established by the late Martha Dewinter for her grandson, Leo Vance. We will also be executing a permanent severance agreement." He slid the documents towards their lawyer. "The terms are non-negotiable. Your clients," he said, with a slight nod in their direction, "will immediately sign over any and all trustee authority they hold over Mr. Vance's inheritance. They will sign a binding relinquishment of any and all claims, now and in the future. And they will sign this cease and desist letter." Their lawyer, a man named Donald, began to read, his face growing paler with each paragraph. He leaned over and whispered frantically to my father, who just stared blankly, a broken man. This is extremely aggressive, Sam," Donald finally said, his voice trembling slightly. "Is it?" Sam replied, his voice dangerously soft. "Because from where I'm sitting, it's incredibly generous. My client is in possession of a digital recording that constitutes clear evidence of a conspiracy to commit felony fraud. He also has a list of over 50 influential witnesses who can attest to your client's slander and libel. What this document offers is my client's silence. It's a gift. The alternative is a lawsuit that will not only bankrupt your clients but will likely result in criminal charges. I suggest you advise them to take the gift." The threat, delivered so calmly, was utterly devastating. Donald swallowed hard and turned to my father. "Richard, he's right. You have to sign." My mother let out a small, choked sob from behind her sunglasses. She reached across the table, her hand trembling. "Leo, please," she whispered. "Don't do this to us. Think of the family. Think of our name." I looked at her, at this woman who was my mother. For a fleeting second, I felt a pang of something, a ghost of the love a son should have for his mother. But it was gone as quickly as it came. "Our name?" I replied, my voice level and cold. "You were the one who was willing to sacrifice your son to protect it. You were the one who was willing to commit a crime to enrich it. You don't get to use that word with me anymore." I looked at all three of them. "The family is a business that went bankrupt a long time ago. I'm just here to sign the dissolution papers." That was the end of it. With a hand that shook with barely suppressed rage, my father took the pen and signed his name. My mother followed, her signature a spidery, angry scrawl. And last was Isabel, who signed without even looking up. They stood to leave. My father paused as he passed my chair. "Leo," he croaked, his voice thick with a confusing mix of anger and something that might have been regret. I hope you're happy." "I am," I said simply. And the most surprising part was that it was the absolute truth. I watched them walk out of the room, three strangers I used to know. The heavy door clicked shut, and a 5-year war finally came to an end. Chloe reached over and squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. The past was finally where it belonged. Behind me. 6 months later, the view from my office window was different. Innovate Leo had exploded. The university rebranding was a landmark success, earning us a slew of industry awards and making us the agency everyone wanted to work with. We had moved into a new headquarters, a sun-drenched loft in the city's restored warehouse district. We'd had to hire 5 new people just to keep up with the demand. I was standing by the desk of Maya, our newest junior designer. She was a prodigy, a 22-year-old with a portfolio that had blown me away. Right now, though, she looked terrified, chewing on the end of a stylus as she stared at her screen. "I don't know, Leo," she said, her voice small. The client wanted something safe, but I had this bolder idea. I think it's better, but maybe it's too much. Maybe I should just stick to the brief. I looked at her design. It was audacious, vibrant, and utterly brilliant. It was exactly the kind of smart, courageous work that my family would have called a doodle. Maya, I said, leaning against her desk, let me tell you a secret. Clients don't always know what they want. They know the problem they have. Our job is to show them a solution they never could have imagined. I tapped her screen. This is that solution. It's risky, it's bold, and it's the right call. I'll back you up 100%. Trust your gut. The relief and gratitude that washed over her face was a bigger reward than any contract. In her, I saw a reflection of a younger me, someone full of talent but crippled by self-doubt. The fact that I could now be the person who gave her the confidence I never had, it felt like I was healing a part of my own past. I walked back to my office, and Chloe was there, holding up her phone with a triumphant grin. On the screen was a gossip column from a local society magazine. The headline read, Vance Family Downsizes. Northgate Mansion sold in quiet off-market deal. Looks like the mighty have fallen, Chloe said, not without a hint of satisfaction. I heard from a friend at the club that they were basically forced out. No one wanted to do business with Richard anymore after the incident. They lost half their clients in a month. I read the short article. It mentioned they had moved to a smaller condo across town. It was a concrete consequence, a tangible result of their actions. I expected to feel a surge of vindictive pleasure. Instead, I felt nothing. Their downfall didn't bring me joy. My success did. Their story was no longer intertwined with mine. My phone buzzed. It was a calendar alert. Lunch with Professor Finch. I met him at a small Italian restaurant near the university. He looked proud, happy, and at peace. He told me about his upcoming retirement, his plans to travel. You know, he said, swirling the wine in his glass, what you did that night, it took more than just courage. It took a profound sense of self-worth. To stand up to people who have spent your whole life telling you that you have no worth. That's a rare thing, Leo. I had good people on my side, I said, thinking of Chloe. Yes, he agreed. But in the end, you were the one who had to walk into that room alone. You built this life, this success, this sense of self. It's truly your masterpiece. Walking back to the office after lunch, the sun warm on my face, I realized he was right. My life was my best design. It wasn't just about the logos or the websites. It was about creating a life of purpose, integrity, and joy out of the ashes of a painful past. And it was a beautiful life. A few weeks after the news of them selling the house, a letter arrived. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope with my name written in my mother's flawless, looping cursive. It had been forwarded from my old condo, a ghost from a past address. I stared at it for a long time, turning it over in my hands. Part of me, the part that still craved a final, clean ending, wanted to burn it without reading. Another part, the part that was no longer afraid, needed to know what her final words would be. That night, alone in my apartment with a glass of scotch, I opened it. It was 4 pages long. It was not, as I had suspected, an apology. An apology requires accountability, and my mother was allergic to accountability. It was a masterpiece of self-pity and blame-shifting. She wrote about the immense pressure she was under from my father, from their social circle. She painted herself as a victim of his ambition. Your father only sees the world in terms of wins and losses, Leo. For him, your art was a loss he couldn't tolerate. She wrote about Isabel. It was just so much easier with your sister. Her path was straight, understandable. Yours was confusing. We didn't know how to support you because we didn't understand what we were supposed to be supporting. Then came the part that was meant to be her checkmate, her final absolution. It was about my Aunt Caroline. You must also understand we were being influenced by others. Your aunt, Richard's own sister, was a constant voice in our ears. I remember after you won that art prize in high school, Caroline called me. I can still hear her voice. Eleanor, you must be firm with him. He'll end up a bohemian. living in some filthy apartment, embarrassing us all. She told Richard you were weak, that you needed a strong hand. She was the one who first used the word dropout. She planted these seeds of fear in us. Leo, we were just trying to protect you from the future she painted. Aunt Caroline, the one who always gave me the sympathetic smiles and the secret $20 bills. She had been the saboteur, the hidden manipulator, whispering poison into their ears to maintain the family's pristine social armor, which she also wore. It was the last pathetic piece of a very pathetic puzzle. The letter ended with the closest thing to a plea she could manage. The sale of the house has been a terrible blow. Your father is not himself. I am writing to you now to ask if you can find it in your heart to understand the position we were in. Perhaps, when things have settled, we can find a way to move forward. Move forward. The audacity of it. As if this were a simple misunderstanding that could be smoothed over with brunch. I read the letter again, and a profound sense of clarity washed over me. For years, I had craved an apology, an admission of guilt. I realized now I would never get one because they were incapable of it. Their entire world was built on a foundation of excuses. And I no longer needed them to admit they were wrong to know that I was right. I folded the letter, slid it back into its envelope, and placed it in a wooden box on my bookshelf. I wasn't keeping it as a wound to be revisited. I was keeping it as a receipt, proof of a debt that had been paid in full, proof that I had bought my freedom, and the price had been my entire past. The box closed with a quiet, satisfying click. Today, I'm standing in my office. It's late, and the city has transformed into a glittering tapestry of light against the dark velvet of the night sky. It's a view I never get tired of, a constant reminder of the world I built instead of the one I was given. For so many years, my horizon was limited by the opinions of two people. Their definition of success, of worth, of love was the only one I knew. I spent so much of my life trying to contort myself to fit into the tiny, suffocating box they had built for me, and then hating myself when I couldn't. Getting kicked out of that house felt like the end of the world. In reality, it was the beginning. It was a forced emancipation. It taught me that sometimes, the most loving thing a family can do is let you go, even if they do it with cruelty instead of grace. Their rejection was the catalyst that forced me to define myself, for myself. The world is so much bigger than the people who try to make you small. Your value isn't something that can be granted or revoked by your parents, your teachers, or your peers. It's inherent. It's the spark in your mind, the passion in your heart, the unique and unrepeatable combination of talents that only you possess. The labels they try to stick on you, dropout, failure, disgrace, they're just words. They're echoes from a past that you don't have to live in. I still think about that night at the party. I think about the look on my father's face when Dean Reed said the words, "Innovate Leo." It wasn't just shock. It was a fundamental breakdown of his entire worldview. In that one moment, his reality was shattered. He learned that the son he had written off as worthless had become more successful, on his own terms, than he ever could have imagined. I didn't need to shout. My success was the roar that silenced all their noise. A message from Chloe pops up on my screen, pulling me from my thoughts. It's a photo of our whole team at our company retreat last weekend, all of us laughing, arms around each other. The caption reads, "Best family ever." I smile. She's right. Family isn't just about the blood you share. It's about the people who show up. The people who believe in you when you don't believe in yourself. The people who cheer for your victories and help you up after your failures. Looking out at the endless horizon, I feel a profound sense of gratitude. Not for the hardship, but for the strength it forged in me. My past does not define me, but it did create me. And I am finally, deeply, and unapologetically happy with the man I have become. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. It's a strange and often difficult journey to find your own path, especially when the people closest to you are the ones standing in the way. I'm curious, have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between who you are and who your family wanted you to be? Share your story or your thoughts in the comments below. And if you haven't already, Please hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Your support truly means the world.